you believe it's been exactly 5 years since the UK left the EU? In this video I'm going to take a quick trip down memory lane and have a look at the Brexit campaign. In January 2013, David Cameron announced that if the Conservative Party won the general election, there will be a referendum on whether to leave or remain in the European Union. I genuinely believe that for him it was just a throwaway announcement. Chancellor George Osborne even warned him that it was a risky business. Cameron didn't even want to leave. And I don't know about you, but up until the referendum, I had never encountered anyone day to day that had any real thoughts on the EU. But there was a small yet vocal pocket of Tory MPs who wanted it. I know, it's incredible that we would take action pandering to a minority of privileged politicians. I think that Cameron, who once put his winky into the mouth of a deceased pig and left his daughter behind at the pub and had to go back and collect her, I think that David Cameron figured that he'd give people the vote, they'd remain as indifferent as they'd always seemed to be, and his colleagues would drop it and we'd all just sort of go on as normal. But oh my, how wrong he was. The Remain campaign quoted dry facts and figures about how leaving the EU would be bad for us. Their tactic was to appeal to people's logic and reason, dismissing people who had thoughts that didn't align with theirs as a bit daft. I can't even really remember any of their campaign. The Leave campaign, however, targeted the general public's emotions. Emotions exist outside of logic and reason, and emotions sway people who may have otherwise not cared. The Leave campaign made passionate promises about taking back control of our sovereignty from the EU. They drove the infamous Brexit bus around saying that we'd save $350 million a week, which would go to the NHS if we left. UKIP produced the Breaking Point campaign poster showing queues of dark-skinned immigrants waiting to come into our country and simultaneously take both our jobs and our benefits. It didn't matter that the picture of the refugees was taken at the Croatian-Slovenian border. It didn't matter that the £350 million was a lie and the figure was much closer to £170 million a week, according to fullfact.org. It all just made a very compelling narrative that made people feel strongly. And yeah, the NHS did get an increase in funding of around £400 million a week by 2019 to 2020, but this all came from taxes and borrowing, not the money that was saved by leaving the EU. And when you account for inflation, the size of the NHS as an organisation, the ageing population, the cost of treatments, it really just is a drop in the Billy Ocean. Seriously, it costs about £200 for a doctor's appointment privately. Look up how much healthcare costs without the NHS. It is insane. But I digress. The referendum happened on the 23rd of June 2016, and I remember it well. The vote came out at 52% Leave, 48% Remain. Just over 46.5 million votes were cast, so that 2% that the vote hinged on accounted for around 1.2 million people, which is about the population of 2 Bristols, or a Bristol and a Sheffield. Some might say that that was too close to call and we probably shouldn't have ploughed on with an expensive and potentially ruinous action that it felt like the government had no real plan for carrying out. But the people had spoken, and Brexit means Brexit. David Cameron promptly resigned, and the UK got its second ever female Prime Minister, Theresa May. Ugh, what a moment that was for British feminists. And then the country was introduced to Snake in the Grass, Dominic Cummings. He was the chief architect of the Leave campaign. Channel 4 actually made a docudrama about him starring Benedict Cumberbatch. It's worth a watch. Now, Cummings freely admitted that the Leave campaign was won under false pretences. He confirmed in an interview with Laura Kuenssberg that the figures that were stated on the Brexit bus were a straight-up lie, saying that he did it to drive the Remain campaign and the people running it crazy. He also admitted to using provocative tactics, such as lying about Turkey's entry to the EU, which would have seen 80 million Muslims joining Europe, and that mattered quite a lot to some people for some reason. He said his tactics were designed to disorientate people on the other side, because that's politics. So it transpired that not only was the result of the referendum arguably too close to call, but also one side of the campaign had been blatantly lying to the public for their votes. Surely that would warrant a rethink on whether we should leave or remain. But no, the government decided that there would be no turning back. Negotiations on our deal with the EU as we left were, as I'm sure you can remember, long, boring and not in our favour. Politicians went into the negotiations with all of the ego of an empire that still hasn't realised they're becoming less relevant, like an ageing rock star. And they also seem to have forgotten that the new EU border would be between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, a notoriously stable and chill area. Meanwhile, wealthy backers of the Leave campaign, such as Victorian ghost Jacob Rees-Mogg, were able to relocate their businesses to EU countries, such as Ireland, to continue reaping the benefits of EU membership. So where has Brexit left us? Well, we've got new blue passports now. Yay! We can only spend a maximum of 90 days a year in Europe. The queues at the airport are longer. In my experience, shipping for goods from Europe takes longer, probably because they're all still stuck in the passport queue. I tried really hard to find someone listing the benefits of Brexit for the average person, but the only things I seemed able to find were blog posts from years ago with claims that were disproven by legitimate sources when I fact-checked it. Sincerely, I would love to know some benefits, so please do share them in the comments if you know any. I know we British love to hate, but it really would be nice to have some positivity on this, given that it's the reality that we have to live in. To be honest, the actual effects of Brexit in an economic sense were difficult to tell, given that we almost immediately had to deal with a global pandemic and the shutdown of society as we know it. And honestly, I'm not here to cast judgment on who voted for what. We were all lied to by people in power. And, some people say Brexit's been good for us, more people say it hasn't. Either way, it's happened, and I think that we're dealing with it in the best way that we know how, which is with a stiff upper lip and a cup of tea. Anyway, thank you for watching, why not subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.